I'm here this morning with Chris Gaubatz. Am I pronouncing
Gaubatz?
Gaubatz.
Gaubatz.
All right, with Vice President of Understanding the Threat. We first met when I attended a briefing, a day-long briefing that you and John Wandalo did in Dallas, and whoa,
Yeah.
just absolutely fascinating. Today you were here at the Capitol speaking in regards to the potential threat of radical Islam here in the state of Texas. How serious is this threat that potentially may be upon us?
Well, thank you for having me here. I'm glad to do this. Always good to talk. And yeah, we were doing a summit for Homeland Security at the Texas State House. And I was invited to speak. My role was to speak about primarily CARE, just because I felt like the legislators needed to know from a security standpoint that when a representative of CARE sponsors Muslim Capitol Hill Day, essentially you're having a Hamas sponsor Capitol Hill Day, because CARE is Hamas.
Now you know a lot about CARE because
I was undercover with them.
Yeah.
I worked undercover for about 6 months. But to answer your question that you originally posed, you know, what type of threat? From a national security standpoint and here in Texas, if you asked me to rate the jihadi threat on a scale of 1 to 10, it would be a 10. No questions asked about it. If this threat is not addressed, we're going to see more jihad attacks. We're going to see a loss of freedoms, like loss of freedom of speech, loss of rights for women. This issue needs to be addressed in its totality, not just physical jihad, but total civilizational jihad.
what do we need to do to better educate the public about what's really going on? Because it's not something we hear on mainstream media.
The nice thing about the election that we just had is that it confirmed what I've believed for a while now, which is simply that the mainstream media is completely irrelevant. So we don't even need to rely on them for information. Couple places that are really good. Understanding the Threat has a website that has a resources section. It is a phenomenal, we spent a lot of time on free downloadable PDFs of actual jihadi writings. We feel firmly at Understanding the Threat that if you want to know this threat, you don't spend most of your time reading what non-Muslims have to say about jihadis. What you do is you study jihadis and what they say, why they're fighting, and what they want.
Take them at their word.
Yes. Now, the gift of the founder of Understanding the Threat, John Wandalo, is simply that he takes something that can seem overwhelming and incredibly complicated, and yet he condenses it into a nice little booklet called Raising a Jihadi Generation. And it is a synopsis of the threat based off of writings by Muslims, Islamic scholars, and jihadis, so that, and evidence in terrorism cases all over the country.
One of the things that I found fascinating when you spoke in Dallas was your description of how to recognize somebody who may potentially be a jihadi by different things that stand out to you. What were some of those things in particular?
Well, to keep it really simple, it's Sharia adherence. So there was a study that was done, and it's a great website. It's called mappingsharia.com, and there was a peer review study that showed that there is a 1-to-1 correlation between adhering to Sharia in the way that a Muslim dresses, in a way that a Muslim prays, in a way that a Muslim interacts with the opposite sex, and actually adhering to Sharia, not just outwardly, but also speaking about Sharia adherence. There's a 1-to-1 correlation between outward Sharia adherence at a mosque and violent material being proposed. And the correlation was simply this, that 51% of the mosques that were done in a random survey showed at least some violence, promoting violence based off of Sharia adherence. But 80% had a moderate form. So 80% of the mosques, based on that study, are promoting violent jihad. And why wouldn't they if they follow Sharia? 100% of authoritative Sharia states that jihad is warfare against non-Muslims and jihad is obligatory. So it's clear and cut. Under the Sharia, there's no question. The only question about whether jihad is obligatory or whether or not jihad is warfare has always been by leaders in Western countries and in the U.S. The jihadis, there is absolutely no question on their behalf as to what jihad means and that it's obligatory on all Muslims. Whether or not a Muslim follows Sharia is our delineating factor. So when we train law enforcement, we train them, if a Muslim follows Sharia, then they are necessarily a threat because Sharia necessarily calls for jihad. The more they adhere to Sharia on that spectrum, the closer they are to being a threat, whether it's physical jihad or whether it's doing political influence or working with law enforcement, anything they can do to cloud the issue. So jihad is not just physical, it's total war for them.
A lot of the jihad, the term civilization jihad, that is where they infiltrate everything from education to political to all the different segments of our society. In your experience across the United States, is that what you're seeing has occurred?
It has been occurring for decades.
Yeah.
And think about textbooks that teach that absolute falsehoods about Islam, about Sharia, about jihad. They have typically had advisors, bless you, typically had advisors that are Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood, as I stated today, has the same goal as Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. And CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, is necessarily a Muslim Brotherhood organization. Let me get that. Per the evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial.
Yeah.
So it's not my opinion that they're Muslim Brotherhood. That was actually proven in a court of law.
How does the average American citizen begin to make a difference in what's going on?
The average American citizen, twofold. Understand the threat as much as you can. And again, there are some good literature. Our website's a good place to go for that.
Absolutely.
The Center for Security Policy has a good website for that issue. Bill Warner has done great work on this. Jihad Watch is another website. So understanding the threat is key. The other aspect of it is understanding where can you fit in and help out. So a lot of times it is working with your pastor to make sure that pastors are speaking truth on this issue. Mm-hmm. Look, from a national security standpoint, if 10% of all the pastors in America actually started speaking truth on Islam, Sharia, and jihad, then we wouldn't be in half the trouble that we're in right now. Because we see this as an insurrection. Whether or not they're going to pull it off is whether or not we actually respond to it. But the Muslim Brotherhood started working in America in the early 60s. They've been at this for decades, doing civilization jihad, per their own words. And so we feel like in any insurrection, the way you defeat that is at the local level. So yes, President Trump can do wonderful things to help us in this war. He can have a Department of Justice that actually wants justice and starts enforcing the laws. He can have Attorney General Jeff Sessions work hard to indict some of these Muslim Brotherhood groups like CARE or the Islamic Society in North America. But at the end of the day, it's going to be pastors and it's going to be sheriffs that win this war. We're going to win this county by county, state by state. The federal government can help us, and that's great. But at the end of the day, administrations come and administrations go. But it's the local communities
the local
that
level.
need to be educated on this, be vigilant, and hold their sheriffs, hold their state representatives, and hold their pastors accountable for what they teach about this issue.
What additional thoughts do you have that we need to share to help awaken people to the reality that this is really I think there's still such a pushback from as the expression goes, it's an inconvenient truth to learn that we've got a really serious problem in hand. People don't want to know this.
No. Well, twofold to that. First, as someone in America, we need to uphold the Constitution. And we need to go back to our roots as Christians, that this nation was founded as a Christian nation. It was founded on Judeo-Christian scripture, period, point blank, end of discussion. In Christianity, you were never told that this walk would be easy. It is only necessary to do the walk. So we win the war at the end, but we will be held accountable by our part in this war.
Yeah.
Were we speaking truth in love? Were we actually doing what is right? And were we standing up for innocence, defending the innocent? Were we standing up for justice? Were we standing up for liberty? Were we standing up for our Christian values? That's what we're going to be judged on in all this.
I want to ask you another thing real quick. I know that you and John Wandalo do teachings for law enforcement. What is the ultimate goal in spending that time with them, and what impact have you seen from that?
Yeah, so when we train law enforcement, we hear universally after we've trained law enforcement on our program that they've never heard the information that we present before, which is scary, because
Yeah.
all we're doing is teaching about the jihad from actual jihadi materials. And we can't expect law enforcement to effectively arrest jihadis if they have no idea what they believe and who they are. The second thing that we hear consistently is that knowing the information that we train is fundamental to protecting their communities. And we hear that whether it's federal, state, or local law enforcement when we train them. We can all disagree on different strategies for how to dismantle the jihadi network, for how to defeat the global Islamic movement. In fact, if I get in a room with people that I respect and admire very much on this issue, we may have different strategies for how to do certain things. But we can't sit at a table and create a strategy to dismantle a jihadi network if there are people at the table that have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. If they don't understand Sharia, the actual threat doctrine that our enemy bases every move that they make on, if we don't understand that, then we can't even begin to talk about strategies for actually defeating them. So that's all that we ask, is that understand this threat, know who they are, and then we can sit down and create strategies, and you may have one idea and I may have another idea, but I'm not going to sit and talk solutions with somebody that has absolutely no clue what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time.
And typically, the law enforcement you're spending time with are letting you know they don't know, that they are clueless.
And they have oftentimes relied upon training at the federal level on this issue, or assumed that the federal government was taking care of this. And we break that myth down pretty quickly.
Yeah.
That this the national security apparatus was purged under the Obama administration of any discussion of the jihadi threat.
Yeah.
And so that's all we do is train them, get them started. And there is a little bit of anger and frustration on their part, because they took an oath to defend the Constitution, and they also swore to protect their communities, and they feel like they've been lied to. And
That reality.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Chris, I appreciate your time. I'd love to get you out to our community, and hopefully we can do that soon. Any last thought, anything else in particular?
Well, go to our website, understandingthethreat.com.
We'll tag it underneath there.
Have us come out and speak to your church. If you have really good contacts with law enforcement, pass our information along. But really, we could use, this is more of an information war. So we could really use your help by being active on social media and retweeting our stuff on Twitter, going to Facebook and liking some of the work that we do, sign up for our newsletter and Understanding the Threat. Get involved any way you can, but we really need your help in this.
Absolutely. Appreciate it very much. Thank you for your work in this area.
Oh, I'm glad to do it.
Thanks.